If you're new here, as I said, my name's Owen Barnes. This is Alabama Football Preview. I'm a grad of Alabama, longtime Alabama fan. And I think that when I look at these previews, mostly I've been looking at what I want to see out of each position group. And I still think I want to do that. But I want to also look at this game, since we have 2 games under each team's belt, as to what has each team shown us in their first 2 games. Neither one have played a Power 5 opponent to this point. But what has each team shown us, and what can we learn from that? Because I think in Wisconsin's case, we can learn a lot. In Alabama's case, I think we can learn some things, but I think there's a little bit more unknown, especially like in that South Florida game, due to some of the injuries that they incurred in that Western Kentucky game, which I think we didn't think were as big an issue because they didn't show up in the Western Kentucky game, but we saw that they were a much larger issue in that South Florida game. So, let's start with Wisconsin. So, when I look at both teams, I'm somebody that's huge into analytics. And if you followed any of the basketball previews, you know that I watch Ken Palm a lot over on the basketball side of the house. On the football side of the house, analytics aren't as huge, but there is one analytics group that I really, really like. And Bill Connolly over at ESPN has what he calls his S&P Plus. And it's all about efficiency, right? Efficiency on offense, defense, and special teams. And, it has nothing to do with who would win on a neutral floor or a neutral field, but it does give you a little bit of an idea about how efficient their offense and defense is, and, what about returning production and things like that. And when you look at the difference in Alabama and Wisconsin, Alabama currently ranks 3rd in S&P Plus with a 30.4 overall efficiency number, and they're 5th in offense and 7th in defense, right? Very good numbers. For reference, Wisconsin is 29th. They boast the 8th ranked defense, so right behind Alabama's. The problem where they come down is the 90th ranked offense. And I think that's where I want to focus in this preview, right? At the end of the day, I think the problem with Wisconsin in this game, and I'll give my prediction at the end, but my problem with Wisconsin in this game is I don't think Wisconsin is going to be able to move the ball on our offense. And I think there's some data to back that up. The first 2 games Wisconsin's played, they played against Western Michigan and South Dakota. They're averaging just over 380 yards a game against 2 very low-ranked opponents, right? These are not power conference opponents. These are not opponents that, are known for having elite defenses. This is not even like a North Dakota State like you saw Colorado play. These are not teams that should be giving Wisconsin troubles on the defensive end, and Wisconsin's only able to put up 380 yards a game. For reference, Alabama had under 400 yards last game, and that's largely due to the penalties, right? Kalen DeBoer talked about in his press conference this week that Alabama lost somewhere between 180 and 190 yards in penalties on the offense this last game. A lot of that has to do with the offensive line and their having Wilkin Formby, and you had Vandemark at left guard, you had Booker at left tackle, you had guys out of their normal positions based on some injuries, and because of that, it meant that guys were, having to be shifted to and otherwise, and it caused penalties on the offensive line, quite frankly. And a lot of that has to do with footwork and fundamentals, and there's more to do with it than just being out of your natural position. But at the end of the day, those penalties cost us those yards on offense. Versus when you look at Wisconsin, from everything that I can tell, they didn't really have that, right? It's not like they got sacked a ton, right? They've only been sacked 3. Tyler Van Dyke's only been sacked 3 times. He got sacked once in the Western Michigan game and twice in the South Dakota game. It's just that the offense overall is not super efficient. It's not a great offense. Van Dyke goes for 58% completion for 192 yards and no touchdowns, averaging just over 5 yards an attempt on 5 yards of completion on the Western Michigan game. And in the South Dakota game, 63% completion, 7.9 yard average, and he does get one touchdown, right? So you're only talking one passing touchdown and just over 400 yards in 2 games. That's not the hallmark of a super efficient offense, right? When you think of Wisconsin, you think of Wisconsin running the ball, and Wisconsin is better at running, is okay at running the ball, but it's, again, not a super efficient offense overall, because when you look at Wisconsin's current rushing yards, 35 carries for 134 yards. They're only averaging 183 rushing yards a game, which is 51st in the country. It's just not a team that is super efficient in any facet, right? It's not a team that boasts a super efficient offense. I mean, Alabama is a more efficient rushing attack, averaging 266 yards, right? So Alabama has 266 yards, whereas Wisconsin has 183 in the same time frame. Against Alabama has played tougher competition because South Florida is better than either team Wisconsin's played to this point, right? The notion could be, hey, this is a huge game and it's in Camp Randall. Yes, I 100% agree. Camp Randall is also where those first 2 games were played. Now, I understand completely that it's different when there's a big game atmosphere. A home crowd obviously is up a little bit more for a big game than they are for a smaller game. I understand that. But at the end of the day, Wisconsin should be scoring more than 27 and 28 points that they scored. And they were also giving up 13 and 14 in those games. Wisconsin won both games by 14 points. And in my opinion, if they're going to give up 14 points to that level of offense that they faced, Alabama's going to be able to put up 35 to 45 points in this game. And I don't honestly believe Wisconsin's going to be able to score more than 14 to 18 points at the most. My gut says, and this is going to be kind of an earlier prediction, and I'll keep talking, but my current prediction's somewhere in the 45 to maybe 20 range at the most, 45-20. But honestly, I don't even know if Wisconsin scores 20 points on Alabama. That may be too much, maybe 45-13. I truly don't think Wisconsin matches up with Alabama from a defensive perspective. I think that Alabama has the explosives on offense and is going to be able to score. And I think that it's a situation where Kalen DeBoer is going to have them locked in. This is a team that's been practicing early, whereas, we've talked a lot about how Nick Saban had them practice in the afternoon, where Kalen DeBoer has his guys practice in the morning. So this 11 o'clock kick is not going to hurt our guys at all. They're going to be absolutely ready for this 11 o'clock kick. They're going to be in a stadium that multiple of the coaches have coached in and coached against. And I think that the team is going to be ready to play. And I think that the offensive line got embarrassed against South Florida, right? 9 penalties. That was the first thing they talked about on tape. That's one of the first things that was talked about. Kalen DeBoer was asked about the injuries. Cole Adams may play, may not, just depends on how he progresses with his arm injury. I don't think whether he's your punt returner or not, I don't think that's going to impact the game too much. And Mbakwe is a more than capable punt returner. And then the bigger injury news is Elijah Pritchett did not re-injure himself in the South Florida game, so he is going to be ready to go. And based on all reports, Caden Proctor is going to be ready to go for this Wisconsin game, right? So you're going to have your original left tackle back. You'll be able to move Booker back to left guard, and you're going to be able to run Pritchett at the right tackle, right? So you have your entire starting offensive line back ready to go, and I think that's a huge difference. I don't want to say offensive line is the only problems with last game, but it was a huge piece of the issue, right? The offense was super inefficient because you got behind the chains, and when you got behind the chains, it caused Jalen to have to do a little bit more than he really needed to. There were plays where it's like, why is Jalen running around? Well, as soon as the ball was snapped, there was somebody in his lap, and he had to run around in case he needed to throw the ball away. He's outside of the pocket. Or, his read was to go here, but he couldn't because he's immediately got somebody in his face, and that read immediately leads to an interception, right? There's just things like that were happening in this last game, and I think that a lot of that had to do with the injuries of the offensive line, and I think that going back to your starters on the offensive line and guys being able to practice together. And I think that's the bigger thing, right? Not that you were missing guys, but that you didn't know who would be able to be back, right? And that's something that DeBoer talked about, is that they ended up playing who had practiced the most together. It's one thing when you lose an offensive lineman and you know you've lost them, because then you can prepare like, hey, these guys have now played together and they understand off of each other's keys. But Alabama was not sure fully who was going to be able to play in that last game. And that had a lot to do with the impact that they saw, that I think we saw on the offensive line in the last game. Their players, Pritchett and Proctor, are both going to be back for this game, and that's a huge impact. Another thing that I think that's going to help Alabama is in the first half, Alabama and Wisconsin are both going to be out a star player. Alabama's going to be without Justin Jefferson, and Wisconsin, and I should have written this down, is going to be without their star linebacker for targeting. Jake Chaney. Both players got ejected for targeting. Both players are going to be out for the first half of this week's game. In Alabama's case, Justin Jefferson is somebody that definitely plays, but is not as big of an impact, in my opinion, as Chaney's going to be for Washington. Chaney for Washington is their star signal caller. He's their star linebacker. Versus when you look at Justin Jefferson for Alabama, he's definitely coming into his own. He made some huge plays in the last game, but Deontay Lawson and Jahad Campbell are your star linebackers, right? So it's not a situation where they're losing the signal caller versus Wisconsin is, right? So in my opinion, the loss to Wisconsin is going to be a little greater on the ejection, and it's something that they're going to have to deal with in the first half. I think that Alabama's ability to be explosive and to start fast, and guys like Ryan Williams and Kobe Prentice and Kendrick Law, I think they're going to be able to have some success against this Washington defense. I think Wisconsin may be able to have some success in stopping the run, at least early, before Alabama kind of stretches out the defense. But I think that Alabama is going to be able to throw the ball, and it's going to be able to open up the run. I think Alabama is going to have a lot of success in this game. When I look at teams and quarterbacks that are going to be able to maybe give Alabama some troubles, I don't think Tyler Van Dyke has the skill set to be able to stress Alabama in the ways that will be needed. I thought Byron Brown had a chance, and he did, but he was just a little off in that USF game. There were a couple of long passes that he definitely wanted back, where he had overthrown some receivers, and he had them with a step or two on our defensive backs. And Kane Womack talked about it in his press conference about some of the issues, and he thought one of them was a substitution situation where USF was going fast, and he didn't think that they had enough time to get their guys back out there. That's not something you're going to face against Wisconsin. Wisconsin's not going to go with the speed that USF is. The only team you may face all season that's going to go at that speed is Tennessee, right? So it's a situation where it's good that you've seen a USF, but Wisconsin's going to run a completely different style of offense. They're not going to run the same speed. You're going to have a different style of quarterback. Not to say that Tyler Van Dyke can't run, but he's not Byron Brown. I think that Byron Brown, honestly, is a little bit more efficient passer as well. We didn't see it a ton in that South Florida game. Like I said, he did miss some shots. But Tyler Van Dyke is not the quarterback that's I think is going to be able to make us pay on some of the issues. I think that if you start going against a higher level quarterback, think like a Quinn Ewers or even maybe Carson Beck, and we'll see in 2 weeks. But those type of quarterbacks are going to be able to stress Alabama's defense a little bit more versus I don't think Tyler Van Dyke is going to be able to cause the problems that with the Alabama defense. I think that Alabama is going to be able to rotate guys in and out and keep guys fresh because obviously you're not going to have the speed at which South Florida was playing at. And because of that, Alabama is going to be able to limit the run. And by limiting the run, when it gets into obvious passing downs, they're going to be able to pin their ears back and come after the quarterback. I would honestly kind of be shocked if Alabama does not create a turnover in this game. I think that Alabama, when you listen to Kane Womack on the mic, and if you have not listened to any of his press conferences, I absolutely recommend it. He's incredible in front of the mic. He really urged his guys like, hey, we were -3 in turnovers last game. Part of that obviously due to our offense, and, special teams having turnovers. But, like, our defense has got to come to play. We've got to get turnovers. That's a huge piece of our defense. He also was upset with the one touchdown they had given up in the red zone. This is something that Kane is going to be preaching, and I think that it would not shock me at all if Alabama's defense has a lot of success in this game based on how they're built and the skill sets that they have. Our weakness, if you want to call it that, is currently our corners. And I don't think that Wisconsin has the playmakers to be able to challenge our corners at the level that they would need to be challenged to really cause Alabama issues in this game. So personally, I think Alabama wins, and I think Alabama wins fairly big. I would expect us to go for a fairly hot start to try to get the crowd out of it as soon as possible. Obviously that's a big key when you're on the road, is the longer you are in a game, you leave the opponent in the game, the more the crowd kind of feels like they have the ability to win. And because of that, the crowd gets more into it and more into it and more into it. So I would fully expect Kalen DeBoer and Nick Sheridan to try to get plays schemed up early and take some shots early and often to see if they can get points on the board quick so that you can then start wearing them down. And also, on top of that, Wisconsin is not an air raid team, right? They threw the ball 36 times against Western Michigan, 27 times against South Dakota, so they definitely can throw the ball, but this is not a team that's meant to just back up and air it out. And so because of that, I fully expect Alabama to try to get out to an early lead and get Wisconsin out of their game plan, because this is something that I think will obviously cause us to have a lot of success in this game. And like I said, ultimately, I think Alabama harbors this to success. I think Alabama wins this game, and I think they win this game going away. I'm actually going to come down a little bit. I'll have my official prediction for this game be 38-13. I think that Alabama has, like I said, I think Alabama has success in this game. I think that Alabama scores early and gets Wisconsin out of their game plan, and I think that the defense does have a turnover. I don't think that the skill set of Wisconsin is going to match the skill set of Alabama, and I think that Alabama is going to have success in some places that Wisconsin just can't copy. So that's kind of my layout for this game. If you are interested, please subscribe to the channel. I would appreciate it. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace.